I have never been to a formal education institution of any kind, not kindergarten, not elementary school, and while this might seem shocking to a lot of people, it won't sound shocking if you were also raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And that's because the Watchtower organization has a long and deep history when it comes to education. In my opinion, this is denying them a fundamental freedom and one of the greatest joys that you can experience in life. Thomas Jefferson once said that if a nation hopes to be ignorant and free, it is wishing for something that has never and will never happen. And I kind of agree with that message. I think in order to be fully free, you need to be sufficiently educated. And by not allowing their members to get the maximum amount of education, they don't only deny them that freedom and keep them in ignorance, but they also deny them one of the greatest joys that you can have as a human being. As we bits of carbon circle around an insignificant star in a vast cosmos, on our short time here on planet Earth, one of the greatest joys that we experience is growing, is learning, is maximizing or reaching our full potential. And the vehicle in which we make that journey on is education. So what do Jehovah's Witness children get in place of this freedom and ability to maximize and reach your full potential? Well, they get modern day slavery and fear. So let's take a deep dive into the wacky world of Jehovah's Witnesses and education. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally and today we are taking a look at Watchtower and education. It is an interesting story and we're going to go back to the very beginning, but quickly before we do that, if you could, this video did take quite some time to put together, so I'd very much appreciate it if you drop a like and maybe comment, and hey, by the end of it, if you really did enjoy it, share it with someone that you think might also enjoy this content. With all of that being said, let's go back to the very beginning at the foundation of Watchtower, and that is with Charles Taze Russell.
The secret of obtaining blessings out of tribulation is the Christian secret of a happy life.
Charles Taze Russell began publishing the Watchtower magazine in 1879, and the education system in America, if you want to call it that, was at a very interesting place, just because of all of the things happening. In 1859, Charles Darwin had published The Origin of Species, and this was something that a lot of Christian schools did not want taught. The theory of evolution was anathema to them, and because a lot of the schools were founded by Christians, I believe 103 of the first 108 colleges in America were actually established by Christians. Maybe it's just a Snapple fact, but anyway, the point is there was an interesting thing happening between, well, are we going to teach more science? Is this going to cause people to lose their faith? When the schools were taught to support people's faith, but were starting to veer away from that more and more. And so amongst the more radical Christian groups, there was a resistance towards allowing their children to attend schools where these ideas might infect them and they might lose out on their faith. Now, the other important dynamic that is going to be quintessential to understanding as we go through all of this is how even way back then, the Bible students were always waiting for the end of the world to arrive. They always had dreams of Armageddon, of everyone that wasn't part of their faith group being wiped out, and them getting their reward with each successive generation. And so because there was this sword of Damocles always hanging over the world, it a lot of times called into question, what's the point of sending your kids to school in the first place, because the end is always right around the corner. And this was a question that someone had written into Watchtower and asked Charles Taze Russell. Let's take a look at his response just to get an idea about the very foundation of how the Bible students and eventually Jehovah's Witnesses would come to view education. So the question was, to what extent should the truth people, such an adorable name, Bible students, educate their children knowing the shortness of the time between now and the time of trouble? Should they pursue a higher education? So this was his response. Now, I would not run the risk with any child I love, and I would love any child of mine, I am sure. Every parent ought to love his children. I would not want to do that for that child anything that would result in the loss of the best thing he has, his faith. It would not be with my consent that my child would go even through the high school, because you will find the same higher criticism now, even in the ordinary schools. So part of his response to this, I won't read the entire thing, but he was talking about what was being taught in colleges, those high universities, that higher education. I believe that's what he's referring to. And he specifically says, hey, you do what you want to do, but if it were my kid, I wouldn't allow them even to go through high school. Now, this wasn't illegal at the time because not every single state had ratified or made laws specifying that all children need to attend some type of schooling. So the totality of the situation here is this man is viewed by his followers as a sort of prophet. He is a messenger from God. He is the mouthpiece that God is using in order to spread information to the people of planet Earth. And in this position, he is saying, hey, if it were my kids, I wouldn't allow them even to go to high school. What do you think parents are going to do because they hold this man in such high regard? They are hanging by his every single word. Are they going to say, well, maybe he's not exactly right? Or are they going to think, yeah, I better pull my kids out of school now so that way we can focus on getting the message out there that the world is going to end in 1914. But alas, the world didn't end in 1914, and they had to have a bit of a rebranding. And with that, it led to the second president of the Watchtower organization, Joseph Rutherford.
Approach the Lord is the point of grace, and in the name of Jesus, and thus to receive confirmation.
The old drunken dictator himself, Judge Rutherford, made a lot of significant changes to the Watchtower organization. He told people they can't grow out beards anymore. I think he wanted an aesthetic change from the days of Russell. He forbid people from celebrating a lot of holidays, including Christmas. Yes, the early Bible students used to even have a Christmas dinner party. He also got rid of the idea that Jesus died on a cross. Instead, he said he died on a tree. So a lot of various changes that he made. Now, something that he didn't change was with regard to how they viewed education and just how near the end of the world was. So this is coming from a golden age from 1923, and they were talking about the subject secular education as a path to salvation. And they brought up this exact same question that was answered previously by Pastor Russell, asking to what extent should the Bible students get an education for their children. And they included comments like children would be better off if they would not go beyond or much beyond a common school education. I do not know of a college anywhere that would really do them any good. And then it went into a very strange rant about how essentially higher education, secular education, worldly education as it started to become known, was basically the cause of the Great War, and that it really proved that Russell was correct in his prediction of 1914. So essentially, because worldly wisdom had taken over and led to pride, it meant that the whole world erupted into chaos and pandemonium. So the Bible students were vehemently against this worldly education and were very much solidifying the idea of an us versus them, a mistrust of any secular outside organizations, especially when it comes to learning something, and a solidifying of the culture where all you need to know is right here within the Watchtower organization. But the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that the end is right around the corner. So this boisterous bozo Rutherford decided he was going to stand on business, and standing on business meant telling the world that millions now living will never die, because the end was going to come in 1925. If you are trying to share this information with a believing Jehovah's Witness, you can easily find a copy of this book for free online, and just hit Control F and type in 1925, and you will find these quotes. What should we expect to take place? In the type, there must be a full restoration. Therefore, the great antitype must mark the beginning of the restoration of all things. The chief thing to be restored is the human race to life, and since the scriptures definitely fix the fact that there will be a resurrection of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and other faithful ones of old, and that these will have the first favor, we may expect 1925 to witness the return of these faithful men of Israel from the condition of death, being resurrected and fully restored to perfect humanity, and made the visible legal representatives of the new order of things on earth. As we have therefore stated, the Great Jubilee cycle is to begin in 1925. At that time, the earthly phase of the kingdom shall be recognized. Therefore, we may confidently expect that 1925 will mark the return of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the faithful prophets of old, particularly those named by the apostle in Hebrews chapter 11, to the condition of human perfection. Based upon the argument heretofore set forth, then, that the old order of things, the old world, is ending and is therefore passing away, and that the new order is coming in, and that 1925 shall mark the resurrection of the faithful worthies of old and the beginning of reconstruction, it is reasonable to conclude that millions of people now on earth will still be on earth in 1925. Then, based upon the promise set forth in the divine word, we must reach the positive and indisputable conclusion that millions now living will never die. Now, this self-proclaimed spokesperson and decipherer of all of the codes of the Bible and the mouthpiece of Jesus Christ himself, here to give accurate knowledge and wisdom to all of God's people, he went even a step further, and as late as 1924, he published a book specifically designed for children called The Way to Paradise. And again, notice how he is really pounding it into their minds that the end is right around the corner. No doubt, many boys and girls who read this book will live to see Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Daniel, and those other men of old come forth in the glory of their better resurrection, perfect in mind and body. And when might you ask was this going to take place? Well, as has been very much established, that was going to be in 1925. He's telling children, hey, boys and girls, you reading this, next year, you're going to be able to have a conversation with Abraham and Isaac. And conveniently, I'm actually building a mansion in San Diego, California, where I'm going to put them up. Little early Airbnb action for the resurrection. Maybe that was his plan for a little side hustle, get some of that resurrection scratch. I guess that's what was going through his mind. Now notice also in this book how he even mentions school. 7,000 years of school life for the race of man to prepare him to enjoy the ages and ages of the future. We think 4 or 5 years in school well spent to prepare for a life of 50 or 80 years. For the after years are enjoyed so much the more as a result of the school training. How much more will this be true of those who have gone through the school of experience, which God has permitted. Not very subtle there when he mentions that it will be 4 or 5 years of schooling, when traditionally children were going at minimum 8 years in school. And it was around the 1920s where, depending on where you lived, obviously there's a north, south, men, women, a lot of different things going on here in America with regard to the school system. But this is where you started seeing high schools develop, where it went beyond 8th grade here in the 1920s. And yet he's saying, you only need 4 or 5 years in school to live a life of 50 to 80 years in this system. Not a very subtle hint that, hey, you don't really need to be worrying about school all that much because you're going to be hanging out on a beach in California with all of those ancient people from the Bible that I've told you about. So, why spend time trying to set up a future that doesn't exist? What you should be focusing on is preaching the good news, spreading the message that the Watchtower organization has the truth. Essentially, you should set your life up to be doing free labor for this organization instead of planning for your future. And this message was going to be solidified even more by the next president of the Watchtower Society. And it's someone that I've said in previous videos really was the person to turn it from a religion to a very structured and organized cult with an incredible amount of rules that were essentially set up to govern every single aspect of people's lives and direct children to be free workers for an international book-selling corporation, which would become an international real estate holding group. It's just, I get bamboozled even saying those words. My brain is just like, wow, this religion is so crazy. Anyway, let's talk about Nathan Knorr.
And the facts of history prove that Christ Jesus has never yet been the ruler of human society.
Now let's put all of this into perspective. Imagine you were a Bible student back in 1910 and your parents pulled you out of school because the end was right around the corner and they were just teaching a bunch of Satan talk in the school system. Anyway, you didn't need that worldly wisdom. Well, the end didn't come. So somehow you managed that great disappointment and you stayed with the organization. Then 15 years later, you have children and 1925 is right around the corner and you think to yourself, well, fool me once, but you ain't gonna get me twice with the same scam. Surely 1925, that is when the end is actually going to take place. Maybe I'll take my kids out of school, or hey, I don't even need to enroll them in school because the end is right around the corner. And again, nothing happens. So now it is 25 years later, and it's the 1950s, and you are seeing the same cycle continuing again, but now, instead of being the kid that was pulled from school, now you are watching your grandkids potentially not getting the maximum amount of education available to them because they're listening to Watchtower. Now, did the organization learn anything from history and say, hey, maybe we should take a few steps back, maybe not be saying these kinds of things? Absolutely, they did not. Now, it would be very problematic for the organization at this point in the 1950s to say, hey, it's okay, just pull your kids from school. They couldn't be a tax-exempt organization. There would be consequences for them going out and saying that to their hundreds of thousands of followers. But what they could do is just move the goalpost slightly. Basically keep the exact same thing, but within the framework of the law. A classic Watchtower tactic that they use. So they shifted and said, hey, do not let your kids go to college and university. Should we go to school or quit? that old question of last summer still haunts our minds. We still are wondering if we did the right thing in returning to finish high school. Or would it have been better if we had entered the full-time ministry in the service of our God Jehovah? You see, because of our dedication to do the will of God, we are not like the others here in school, whose only ambition is to get ahead, attain a high social position, and make a lot of money. We know this old system of things will soon be destroyed at Armageddon. So why the reasons for attending high school when we could be out warning others? Besides, there is a great risk that one will be caught in the quicksands of immorality or lose one's faith altogether due to the godless conditions in the school today. However, our parents and closest friends whom we asked for advice were so divided in their opinions. We are now back in school. But as we look out the window, we still wonder, what is the right answer? Here is a simple formula by which the complex problem can be solved. List all the reasons for not attending high school in one column, and in another add up all the reasons why one should attend. Then by simple subtraction, the correct answer is obtained. And then they go and give all the reasons why you wouldn't want to be in school. All the classic Jehovah's Witness arguments. You'll basically end up worshiping Satan, pregnant, you'll be persecuted, beaten, slandered, all manner of bad things will happen to you. But then, to this article's credit, they do spin things around and talk about the positive things that you can get from an education and ultimately land here, being now fully convinced that it is proper and right to complete high school before entering the full-time ministry. Go ahead with resolute determination to get as much possible out of school. So they established, hey, it's okay, you can get your high school diploma, but you're doing this before you enter the full-time ministry. There is not even the thought or consideration that one might want to go off to college to further their education and set themselves up for the future for a better life, or even because they value education for what it brings. That love of learning, that curiosity, that, I can take the grip of my life and I can solve problems and figure things out, make discoveries. All of that excitement? No. None of that's for you if you are Jehovah's Witness. Because why? You have to get your butt out there in the full-time ministry. Now, never to be forgotten with these Jehovah's Witness teachings are the nearness of the last days, Armageddon. It's always right around the corner, which brings us to the 1975 debacle. Awake 1969 said, if you are a young person, you also need to face the fact that you will never grow old in this present system of things. Why not? Because all the evidence in fulfillment of Bible prophecies indicates that this corrupt system is due to end in a few years. Of the generation that observed the beginning of the last days in 1914, Jesus foretold, this generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur. Therefore, as a young person, you will never fulfill any career that this system offers. If you are in high school and thinking about a college education, it means at least 4, perhaps even 6 or 8 more years to graduate into a specialized career. But where will this system of things be by that time? It will be well on the way toward its finished, if not actually gone. Watchtower 1968. Are we to assume from this study that the Battle of Armageddon will be all over by the autumn of 1979, and the long looked-for 1,000-year reign of Christ will begin by then? Possibly, but we wait to see how closely the 7,000-year period of man's existence coincides with the Sabbath-like 1,000-year reign of Christ. If these two periods run parallel with each other as to the calendar year, it will not be by mere chance or accident, but will be according to Jehovah's loving and timely purposes. Our chronology, however, which is reasonably accurate but admittedly not infallible, at the best only points to the autumn of 1975 as the end of the 6,000 years of man's existence on earth. It does not necessarily mean that 1975 marks the end of the first 6,000 years of Jehovah's seventh creative day. Why not? Because after his creation, Adam lived some time during the sixth day, which unknown amount of time would need to be subtracted from Adam's 930 years to determine when the sixth 7,000 year period or day ended, and how long Adam lived into the seventh day. And yet the end of that sixth creative day could end with the same Gregorian calendar year of Adam's creation. It may involve only a difference of weeks or months, not years. You will not grow old in this system of things. It's only a few years off. If you are going to start college, it could take 4 years. Where's the system going to be in 4 years? Probably gone. Oh, by the way, have we mentioned that there's this weird 6,000 years of mankind's ruling themselves, and Jehovah's 7, the biblical phenomenon of 7. Oh, 7 means perfection. Hey, maybe in the 7,000th year of mankind's existence, and we also know that Jesus is going to have a millennial 1,000-year reign before this new system of things. It all kind of lines up, doesn't it? We're not saying for sure, absolutely 1975, but it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? It is insane that they can to this day still back away and try and pretend that they weren't predicting the end of the world in 1975. And if you're looking for proof, you can just take a look at the numbers. They have a massive spike of people getting involved in all manner of Jehovah's Witness activities surrounding 1975, selling their houses, pulling their kids out of school, starting pioneering because they were sure and confident that the end was actually going to happen this time. After so many disappointments, this had to be the time. And yet again, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So you have another generation of Jehovah's Witness children that are deprived of a valuable education, whether it was back in the day maybe getting pulled out of a high school altogether, or now not having the opportunity to go to college or university. You are creating not generational wealth for you and your family, but you are creating generational servitude to an organization that continues decade after decade to spread falsehoods, to lie to your face in the name of Jesus Christ. They claim to speak for God and continue to fail, and yet parents, for some reason, will still make the same mistakes that their parents made, that their parents made, that their parents made. It creates a generational problem where you are passing on the sunk cost fallacy to your kin. And unfortunately, the issue continues even to this day. Well, maybe not quite, because I think this might be something that the Jehovah's Witnesses actually change in the very near future, but a little bit more on that later. Let's get into the final raid boss, as I like to call it, where Watchtower goes video production mode. They start what is known as the JW broadcasting era. So despite a century of disappointment, of lack of education, of false promises, of downright lies and manipulation, just to get more free work out of their people, a governing body member has the audacity to come on camera and say this.
Personally, I am so thankful to Jehovah that positive peer pressure was put on me to enter the pioneer ministry right out of high school. What a blessing and a protection it was to enter the regular pioneer work at age 17 and to be able to go to Bethel at 18. Even though there was considerable worldly pressure put on me to pursue university education, I am so happy that with Jehovah's help, I decided to build my future with Jehovah. Truly, I have no regrets. And this is always true of young ones who serve Jehovah from their hearts.
Well, I'm sure happy for this rubber-faced man for feeling no regret. But what about the millions of people that have been affected by Watchtower's policies because they were unfortunate enough to spawn into a Jehovah's Witness family? Are we going to consider if they might have some regrets, if they might wished they had gotten a further education? Now, it's not only this language that, hey, don't you worry about it, Buster, you're not going to have any regrets. Look at all of these people that have come before you. They don't regret it, even though people won't answer that question honestly and actually tell you if they do regret it. There's also another aspect of this where they have an almost mocking approach to secular education.
How far will you go? Well, now, when people ask that question, how far will you go, normally in connection with secular education, the meaning of the question is, well, are you going to get your bachelor's degree? Are you going to go for your master's? Are you going to go for a PhD and get your doctorate? And so in that sense, often going far in secular education is solely a means of self-fulfillment, and not necessarily to help others. Some study what's called pure science, meant just to advance mankind's understanding of science, but with no practical benefit. Some study dead languages. Some study bacteria or insects, which is wonderful if you like insects.
Well, listen here, bucko, I bet if your butt gets an infection, you'll be super happy that people dedicated their entire lives to studying bacteria. It's going to come in handy for you, but you can sit there with your sneering attitude and your pompous way of looking down at everyone else in the world for wanting to make the world a better place. They literally say they're studying it for nothing. They are not going to help other people. As if people that advance science and medicine don't help people. What an insane thing to say. Here you are knocking on people's doors so that way you can lie to them. You have the historical proof behind you. All your activity is just a lie and this thin veneer in order to get more free workers for your. First it was a publishing company, now it's a real estate company, and you know the history because he's on the governing body. He knows all of the problems of the organization, and yet he says those people that study that worldly wisdom, those doctors and scientists, they are not helping people. But the education that I provide, that is where we're really getting the life-saving work. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, you'll be hard-pressed to find any written material from the Watchtower saying, if you go to college, if you let your kids go to college, this will be the consequences, because it's not something that they want to advertise out there to the world. But they do have some leaked elders training videos that give us a sense of how the Jehovah's Witnesses will handle a situation where a father lets his children pursue higher education, and if that's seen as a good thing or a bad thing. And remember, this is not something that they just release to the public, but it's for their leadership or those in charge of the congregation's eyes only.
Brothers, thank you for considering this matter regarding Brother Brown. and the impact that his family situation is having on the congregation. I asked you, brothers, to review his qualifications as an elder. After we spoke, and Brother Brown had an opportunity to explain to me some of the decisions that he's made for his family. I'm aware that you brothers have considered this matter before, but since then, another one of Brother Brown's daughters have enrolled in a school for higher education, which raises questions as to how this affects the congregation. When we make decisions, it's important that we consider the conscience of the congregation as well as the elder body. Brother Brown, I know this can't be easy for you, and it's not easy for us either. Please be assured that we love you, and we only want what's best for you and your family. Remember, you're among friends here, so please feel free to express yourself and to answer any questions that your fellow elders may have. Brothers, we are obligated to put the interests of the congregation first.
Brothers, with all due respect, I don't agree with you that the congregation is disturbed about my or my family's situation. I've been in the congregation for 20 years. I know the publishers very well, and I'm sure no one is disturbed about my daughter's pursuing higher education. As far as my younger daughter is concerned, she was judicially reproved, but it wasn't announced to the congregation, so she's repentant. And no one has approached me expressing that they're disturbed about me supporting my daughters seeking higher education, trying to better themselves. It's not like they're leaving the truth.
Now, for anyone that doesn't understand the power dynamics that are happening here, the guy on the end here, he is the circuit overseer. So Watchtower is very culty thanks to Nathan Knorr, and they have everything subdivided out. So it's the governing body at the top. They see over the entire world. And then from there, you have different branches. These branches could be in Argentina, you could have one in Germany, you could have one in the United States. So all of those branch territories are subdivided into different circuits. And those circuits will have X amount of congregations, something like 20 or something. And inside each one of those, or in charge of those circuits, is a circuit overseer. And inside each one of those congregations, there are congregation elders. And then that congregation is broken up into smaller bits known as service groups. So it goes from worldwide all the way down to 10 to 20 witnesses. There's always some dude in a JCPenney suit that is making sure everyone is falling in line and doing what they're supposed to do. Now, this is their kangaroo court, essentially. Whenever there's a problem with someone in the congregation, usually it's just the elders that would talk amongst themselves and figure it out. But if there is a disagreement amongst the elders, well, then they have to go to the next supervisor up. So they contact the circuit overseer, and he comes in and handles the business. He figures out what the situation is. So just for a little context about what's going on here, and this isn't real, this is just a little skit that Watchtower made as a training tool for elders to watch so they would know how to handle a situation like this when it comes up.
Brother Williams, please.
Brother Brown has served faithfully for many years. But the question that's within paragraph number 30 is important. How is he viewed by the congregation? Sad to say, the actions of his family have caused him to lose the respect of the congregation. In fact, some publishers have mentioned that if they need scriptural advice on family life, they'll just talk to another elder.
Thank you for those comments, Brother Williams. Brother Anderson, please.
The same paragraph says, if an appointed brother's children pursue higher education, does his life pattern show that he puts kingdom interests first in his life? I don't think any of us can honestly say that Brother Brown's family is viewed as putting kingdom interests first in their life. Their conversations aren't spiritual, and I don't think the family, the wife, or the daughters have ever regular or auxiliary pioneered.
That is a cause for concern. Brother Miller, please.
I agree with those comments. And in addition, The last question in paragraph 30 asks, does the pursuit of higher education interfere with regular meeting attendance, meaningful participation in field service, or other theocratic activities? His girls are not visible in the ministry, and because of their class schedule, they rarely are at meetings. It's obvious that spiritual things have become second place in their life.
So it appears that they're drifting spiritually. Brother Anderson, please.
Yeah. And 1 Peter 5:3 says an overseer should be an example to the flock. But the reality is the family is a poor example, and they're having an influence on other young ones in the congregation who are now also considering pursuing higher education.
So behind closed doors, this is what Jehovah's Witnesses actually teach and think about higher education. In their public-facing speeches, or whatever they print in their magazines, they won't say it to this degree, but in private, behind closed doors amongst their elders, this is what they think about it. These people are not an example. You won't have the trust of the congregation. They don't respect you anymore, all because this guy allowed his kids to go to college. Now, the last guy, he brings up a point that is the most interesting, is does this interfere with their kingdom activities? Are they putting the Jehovah's work first? Well, what that translates to is how willing are they, how available are they to do free work for the organization? Because at the end of the day, they don't want kids pursuing things that might give them freedom. They don't want kids they don't want to have their kids be in a situation where they might learn about the art of thinking. Because if you apply critical thinking to Watchtower's doctrine, it easily crumbles and falls apart. So, because of that, this is a whole situation that is occurring where this elder now has to be removed, he has to be talked to, all because children and their parents want freedom and education.
Let me ask you, do you think that the elder body is accountable to Jehovah to uphold his high standards for appointed men? And isn't that what you would encourage them to do?
Yes.
That's why when we weighed all of the facts and the scriptural qualifications, as well as considering the direction from Jehovah's organization, the body of elders and I decided that you no longer meet the qualifications for an appointed man.
I understand what you're saying, but I do not agree with this decision.
Sorry, my cat Zizi was rubbing all over me, so if my words haven't been coming out so good, it's because I'm trying to hold back all the coughs, because my allergies flare up when he gets all over me. Anyway, this guy, he is going to be an apostate. It won't take long for him to crash out, become bitter and angry about this whole situation, and he's hitting the road, and they won't really care. They'll be like, hey, don't let the door hit you on the butt when you get out of here. But this is what the organization does to people. Unless you are so strict and so severe and listen to all of their control mechanisms, even though they tell you you don't have to, you could, it's a personal decision to allow your children to receive a higher education. Yet, the reality of the situation is this is what happens. Everyone loses respect for you. Bada bing, bada boom. You are no longer a Jehovah's Witness. Now, with all of this history of these policies and being so horrible and limiting people's ability to grow to their maximum potential, you would think that there is not a chance ever that the organization would finally see the light of day and start easing up on some of these policies. Well, That brings me to maybe a little bit of a speculation here. Some might call me a little bit crazy for thinking this, but I actually think the organization is going to change their policies about allowing kids to go and pursue higher education. And I think it all starts with a deleted video from none other than the removed governing body member, Tony Morris.
Back in 2005, the faithful slave provided counsel regarding higher education in the October 1st, 2005 issue of the Watchtower, pages 26 through 31. The article was entitled, "Parents, What Future Do You Want for Your Children?" The cover of the very next issue, October 15th, 2005, asked the question, what is the best education? You may have noticed that we've not published that thorough of a discussion on the subject since that time. Why is that? Has the governing body changed its position regarding the pursuit of higher secular education? No. We feel that all of the cautions that we have addressed in the past are still valid. However, our goal now is to focus on and intensify our promotion of the pursuit of divine education.
So as he's saying that, he is in a position where he can speak for the governing body. But they got rid of him. They kicked him to some ho-dunk town in North Carolina, never to be heard from again. They had a little post-it saying he is no longer on the governing body, and they've gone radio silent ever since. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have speculated on exactly why he got removed and the reasons for that, and I think we pretty much have it nailed down, but that's neither here nor there for this particular discussion. What I do find interesting, though, is how he is saying, you know, guys, we haven't published anything since 2005. That doesn't mean we've changed our minds. And then, secretly and silently, a couple of months ago, the governing body, after they kicked him out, decided to delete this video. Didn't give any explanation as to why, they didn't even mention it, they just poof, snapped their fingers, and it's gone. Why would they delete a video like this? Could it be because they are planning on making some adjustments and changing the narrative and the attitude and the culture with regard to higher education? That's where I think this thing could be going. But let's not move ahead too quickly here, because I do want to play one last thing from this talk that has been deleted from the JW website from Tony Morris.
The cost of obtaining university training is not our primary concern. It is the potential for spiritual harm that has moved us to provide the cautions we have shared in the past. Ultimately, it is the decision of the parents as to the amount of secular education they feel is necessary for a child to later care for a family of his own. As parents, we would be remiss if we did not encourage our child to pursue a skill or trade that would enable him to start off a marriage successfully. Having said that, it does not change the fact that all too often our young people have met with spiritual disaster, especially after leaving home and living on a university campus. So parents and children, you need to have a goal and you need to have a plan. If you're missing either one, Satan will provide it for you. Young people, ask yourself, why am I considering additional education? Is it because I'm pursuing a specific skill or trade to support my service to Jehovah? Or have I been pressured by the system into believing that higher education will somehow make me a more respected person or lead me to a better life?
Now that we've considered the entire historic context behind Watchtower's predictions of the end and how they talk about worldly education, can it really be said that the worldly influences are the ones trying to trick you into thinking that this will lead to a better life or you'll be more respected? Because the evidence, I think, that we've presented here is very clear. Watchtower has been the one lying to people. They have been the ones that have been tricking people, all in their vain attempts to keep their free work, because they want children to sign up to work for them for free.
We also see Jehovah's Spirit at work in you young ones, and we want to open up to you the opportunity to enter special forms of service as soon as possible. Our current and future needs require more young brothers to make themselves available for expanded theocratic service. Our heartfelt desire is for as many of you young ones as possible to experience the unique and special training of excelling value that is available at Bethel and on theocratic construction projects. It will accelerate your training in developing spiritual qualities, equip you to handle more responsibility in the congregation, and to address needs at Bethel and in the field. So truly, young ones, we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. Glorify Jehovah by getting involved in Bethel work and theocratic construction as soon as possible. We know that you parents, you love your children and you want the very best future possible for your young ones. And so we encourage you, set goals of full-time service in front of your children and help them to achieve these goals. And will you miss them if they should be called to Bethel or they go off on a Kingdom Hall assignment somewhere? Of course you will. But don't hold them back and insist that they stay home with you for fear of missing them. You may be depriving them of the most fulfilling life. Can you lend your son or daughter to Jehovah? Why do we say lend? It's because Jehovah will give them back to you. In the new world, you will have an eternity to spend with your family together in paradise. But right now, we have a work to do. So we thank you for training your young ones to take the lead in full-time service.
And the saddest part of that is if, for instance, you do listen to their advice and you do work full-time for Watchtower, 20 years goes by, 30 years goes by. Hey, you might not be useful to them anymore. They might kick you out of their little Bethel compounds where you've been doing free work for them for 30 years. No 401k, no savings, nothing. They might kick you out and say, Godspeed, God will take care of you, don't worry about it. And that'll be that. That is what this organization does to people. That's why I'm okay saying it's equivalent to modern day slavery. What happened back in the day? Everyone feared don't let the slaves get an education. We need to make sure it's illegal for the slaves to learn how to read and write, because man, once they can start educating themselves, things might go terribly for us. This is kind of what the organization has done, refusing to let people get a proper education to better their lives, to keep them ignorant, denying them freedom, so that way they can just keep their free labor. Now, for all of these reasons, I think that change is coming, not only because they deleted this video, but what sparked this entire idea to make this, well, I've had it in my head for a while, but was a whiteboard animation that they recently posted where they talked about, should you drop out of school? And notice the tonal shift that this has versus all of the history of what Watchtower has said about school.
School can be stressful, whether you're in a classroom or able to be schooled at home. Even the best students have days where they'd rather be anywhere else. And just because you're there doesn't mean you're always plugged into what's happening. For example, do you deal with anxiety or depression? Are you among the many young people who get bored at school or find it difficult to focus in the classroom? Does your family rely on you for financial support? Do you worry about bullies or violence at school? Problems like these can discourage you. You could start to skip classes and your grades may suffer. The more you fall behind, the easier it is to listen to that little voice inside that says, just drop out. But
a voice that, especially if you are Jehovah's Witness, might be very easy to listen to because, hey, the end is right around the corner. I'm just going to pioneer and, what's the point of going to school anyway? And Watchtower, in years past, wasn't really opposed to that idea.
wait! The Bible says that a smart person thinks about each step he or she takes. So first, think about how school can help you. The real benefit of a basic education is more than just the subjects you study. Education is training for your brain. By studying a variety of subjects, you learn how to learn and practical skills such as reading and writing, things you'll need to do in the real world. The Bible encourages us to safeguard practical wisdom and thinking ability. School is a great place to sharpen your problem-solving skills and learn more about yourself and the people around you.
Yes, they're openly talking about learning how to study, learning how to think, learning how to learn, and an interesting one where they say it's an opportunity for you to learn about people around you. No mention of, hey, if you go to school, you're going to be pregnant while you're doing drugs and robbing a bank. No, they seem to actually not be trying to fearmonger children and thinking that school is this awful place where Satan is trying to get them, but where they might actually get some useful information and life skills.
Of course, the challenges you face don't just disappear. But staying in school trains you to deal with them. You learn self-discipline and how to prioritize what's important. You could learn a skill and find work after you graduate. If you drop out, your options for future employment may be limited. A good education also protects you. When you're well informed, it's harder for others to take advantage of you. So if you're struggling at school, don't give up. Reach out to someone, your parents, a mature friend, or teacher for help.
Now this is also interesting, even reaching out to a teacher for help. This is not something you would traditionally see Jehovah's Witnesses say. They view any worldly teachers as offering bad advice, as people not to be trusted because they don't have your best interests at heart. They don't have your spiritual interests in mind. They're just trying to get you to pursue a better life, trying to get you to go to college. This is like a time when they're actually positive. Hey, if you're struggling, reach out to your teacher for help. Could this be a shift? I don't know. They're clearly not saying it's okay to go to college with this little whiteboard animation. That's not happening here. There's still the assumption that, hey, you're just going to get through high school. But there's at least some positive aspects of getting an education and listening to teachers. And I feel like that could be the foundation in which they start maybe not coming out and saying outright, hey, it's okay, but for there to be a slow cultural shift where, hey, if you want your kid to go to college, we're not going to pull you into the kangaroo court elders meeting where we're going to have to question you about how is your integrity? Are you a righteous person? Does the congregation respect you, Todd? I don't think any of that will be happening in 5 or 10 years within the organization. So just my thoughts about where this might be going. That's about all I have to say for this subject, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you're still around, please drop a like on the video and share this with someone that you think might be interested in it. Hey, you can share it with me. Share it with yourself. I don't know if I can say that, but I did, so whatever. With all that being said, stay safe, be kind, and don't forget to love the things you love more than you hate the things you hate. And you better have a good-ass day.